Air power should have been one of Russia's biggest advantages over Ukraine. With almost 4,000 combat aircraft and extensive experience bombing targets in Syria and Georgia, Russia's air force was expected to play a vital role in the invasion, allowing the Russian army to go deep into Ukraine, seize Kyiv, and destroy the Ukrainian military. But more than 2 months into the war, Vladimir Putin's air force is still fighting for control of the skies. The Russian Air Force's failure is perhaps the most important, but least discussed, story of the military conflict so far. Ukrainian forces displayed surprising strength in the air, and adapted as the fighting progressed. But either side of this war could still gain air supremacy, and fundamentally change the course of the conflict. Unfortunately for the Russians, the recent modernization of the Russian Air Force, although intended to enable it to conduct modern combined operations, was mostly for show. The Russians wasted money and effort on corruption and inefficiency. All this meant that when the invasion started, the Russian Air Force was incapable of running a complex campaign. Instead of working to control the skies, Russia's Air Force has mostly provided air support to ground troops or bombed Ukrainian cities. Focusing on ground troops can work if you have almost endless numbers of soldiers and are prepared to lose them. But so wedded is Russia to its history of successes on the ground that it fails to understand the importance of air power. Russian aircraft are instead left flying their straightforward missions, many of which use single aircraft without the mutual support from combined air operations that would be expected in an advanced NATO air force. The pilots are given a target, fly in quickly to attack it, in many cases relying on unguided munitions to try to hit their target, and then fly out and try to not get shot down. Even Russia's intelligence and surveillance capabilities seem surprisingly weak. Rarely do Russian forces seem capable of identifying possible targets and deploying air assets to attack them swiftly enough to make a difference. Of course, the most important reason for the failure of Russian air power, and the evident caution of Russian pilots, has been Ukrainian opposition. Unlike their enemy, the Ukrainians have developed a coherent concept of air operations, one that has allowed them to block what looked like an easy path to Russian air dominance. The Ukrainians have integrated a range of air and anti-air capabilities to stymie the much larger Russian air force. Starting with cheap, handheld, portable surface-to-air missiles, the Ukrainians have been able to restrict Russian air power to a few eastern and southern areas, greatly limiting Russian freedom of maneuver. The addition of much more potent, and longer-range, S-300 missile systems from Slovakia makes the Russians even more vulnerable. The threat of the S-300 forces individual Russian aircraft, which generally lack refueling, electronic warfare, and command and control support, to fly low to the ground to screen themselves from attack. This, in turn, makes them more vulnerable to the handheld surface-to-air missiles. Ukraine cannot target every Russian aircraft, but it has cleverly used what it has to ensure that Russian pilots worry they might be targeted anywhere, forcing them to behave more defensively. Ukraine's ability to contest its airspace has not only provided protection to its own forces but also allowed it to occasionally go on the offensive. Early in the war, the Ukrainians were able to use Turkish-made Bayraktar drones to attack some high-value targets. The Ukrainians have also used drones to identify and destroy Russian ground-to-air missiles, making Russian ground forces more vulnerable to attack from above. The Ukrainians have also shown a far greater ability than the Russians to use their limited airpower resources creatively. The sinking of the Russian Black Sea flagship Moskva, which stunned the world, seems to have come about through a clever double punch. Ukrainian officials have claimed that they used an unmanned aerial vehicle to distract the Moskva's anti-air capabilities, then launch their homegrown Neptune anti-ship missiles before the confused Russian crew could react. This inventive use of air power reveals that the Ukrainians might even have a more sophisticated understanding of air operations than even many NATO countries, which take their dominance of the air for granted. The coming time will reveal whether the Russians have the capability to learn from their mistakes and take better advantage of their still massive numerical superiority in aircraft. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, will soon see their offensive air capabilities grow. Their newest drones may be enabling better long-range artillery targeting. On April 30th, Ukrainian artillery fire seemed to come close to hitting General Valery Gerasimov, the Russian chief of the General Staff, while he was visiting the front. The Ukrainians are receiving even more advanced systems, including new Switchblade and Phoenix Ghost drones, which have the capability of lingering over enemy positions for some time before being used to destroy vehicles. As long as the airspace over the field of battle remains contested, the Ukrainians will be able to improve and expand their use of air power. They may not win the war outright, but they've already revolutionized how the next ones will be fought.